You're listening
to the CD Baby DIY
Musician
Podcast.
Hey there, and welcome to episode number 91 of the CD Baby DIY Musician Podcast. My name is Kevin Bruner, your host for the show, and on this week's podcast, you're going to hear from Scott Sellwood of RightsFlow. A couple weeks back, I put out the question through Twitter asking what topics you, the listening audience, wanted us to cover on the show. The number one response I got was how to properly license a cover song. I thought this was good timing as CD Baby just started working with a company called RightsFlow that helps indie artists secure mechanical licenses for cover songs. They make it really easy to do it, so I asked Scott of RightsFlow to come on the podcast and help explain the whys and hows of licensing a cover song. So let's get to my interview with Scott. Well, joining me on the phone is Scott Sellwood from RightsFlow. Scott, how you doing?
Doing great. How are you?
I'm doing well, and thanks for taking time out of your day to be on the podcast. And like I said when we were talking before we started recording, that I've been asking our listeners lately the topics they want covered on this podcast, and the number one question that came back, and pretty much the number one question we get here at CD Baby from our artists in general is how do I properly license a cover song? So I'm glad to have you on the show. And why don't you start out by giving us a little bit of your background and tell us a little bit about RightsFlow, the company you're working for.
Sure. I am the in-house lawyer and senior vice president at RightsFlow. And RightsFlow is a New York-based startup company that specializes in clearing mechanical licenses and paying the mechanical royalties. And we do that on behalf of artists, record labels, music distributors, and online music services. We clear mechanicals, which is cover songs, third-party published songs for very large companies, as well as for a garage band who only needs one cover song. And my background is, apart from the law, I was a touring musician with a number of bands based out of California and based out of Detroit, Michigan for about 15 years, and have sold a number of records over the years through CD Baby.
Well, that's cool. Well, why don't we start out with you giving us a specific definition of what a cover song actually is. I know a lot of people are probably thinking everyone has to know what that is, but we get that question a lot. There still seems to be some confusion of what dictates a cover song.
Sure. At its most basic, a cover song is when one person creates a recording of a composition that they do not own or did not write. Mm-hmm. And so in order to properly and legally distribute or sell a cover song, you are supposed to go get permission from the song owner and then pay a royalty to the song owner.
The U.S. law guarantees that to the rights owner. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So the permission that you would go get from the writer of the song is called a mechanical license. And the term mechanical is somewhat of an anachronism. It dates back to the player piano days where songwriters were being compensated for the actual kind of mechanical reproduction of their songs. But today we still call it mechanical, and it just sort of stuck. But yes, that the permission is called a mechanical license, and the royalty rate that you are supposed to pay for each mechanical license is set by the United States copyright law.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know one of the areas of confusion for our artists is all the new methods of delivering music in the digital age. When it was basically just CDs people were making, artists would make a CD. You know, if they had a cover song on there, they would go get a license for the number of CDs they were creating, and then it would pretty much be done unless they created more CDs. But things are a little different now, and it seems like there's a lot of gray area as to what artists are responsible for and how to even go about obtaining a license for streams and things like that. Can you explain a little bit of that for us? How it works in the digital age now and some of the things that have changed over the last couple of years?
Yeah, sure. I mean, things certainly have changed in many respects, but in other respects, it's a fairly analogous process in the digital world to the way it's always been, in the physical world. And the mechanical, just to take a quick step back, I mean, the mechanical license and the mechanical royalty is triggered for every reproduction of a song, of the composition, the words and the lyrics. We're not talking about the recording side. We're just talking about the composition of the song. So every reproduction requires a mechanical license and the payment of the mechanical royalty. And currently, for a full reproduction, that royalty is 9.1 cents. So if you're pressing a CD that has one cover song, you are supposed to pay 9.1 cents each time you press that CD to the owner of to the songwriter of the cover song. Now, the same royalty rate applies for a download, a permanent download for iTunes. That download is also considered a reproduction of the composition, just like as if you were pressing a CD. So the record label or the artist, if the artist and the label are the same person, which happens a lot in independent music, is responsible for paying the mechanical royalty to the songwriter or the publisher, whether it's a CD pressing or a digital download on iTunes. Mm-hmm. It gets a little more complicated when you start talking about streaming because in that situation, the royalty rates have been set up differently, and the streaming services have to calculate how much mechanical royalties they are supposed to pay based on a very complicated formula that takes a look at how many streams there were, how many people are using the service, what is the service's revenue, and the service goes through a complicated formula where they determine how much is paid per stream, and that could be usually a fraction of a cent. And that is the mechanical royalty that must be paid by the label or the artist every time their cover is streamed.
Well, talking about streams there, is that something that you said the artist or the label is responsible for paying, but how does the artist or the person releasing the album with the cover song get that information? I mean, because I know that the artists at like that are being distributed through CD Baby, we pay them based on here's the royalty for your music being streamed, whether it's a cover or not. And they have no indication of, that other information. And there seems to be a lot of misinformation floating around. Like sometimes we hear, the service pays the mechanical royalty. And sometimes we hear, no, they don't. The artists are responsible for it. And it's just very confusing.
It is confusing. I mean, there are, I would say that most of the services, because of that exact problem of passing information on the distribution chain, I think most of the interactive streaming services will pay the mechanicals themselves, and they will either do that by trying to find the songwriters and licensing with them and paying the royalties directly, or they will, in their agreements with the distributors of the labels, ask the distributors of the labels to make those payments based on the royalties that the labels receive. So it sounds like in CD Baby's instance, I would bet in most cases that the streaming service would take responsibility for paying the mechanicals. Okay. But each artist should inquire to make sure that you have a full understanding as to what your obligations are under your digital distribution agreement.
Is there any sort of stream or music delivery like that where that wouldn't apply? Because it seems like in the situation of like a Pandora, that starts to get a little tricky because it's a stream, but it's also kind of like a radio station. And I think those are the areas where, for the artist, it seemed to be cut and dry in the past. I got a CD, I reproduced a song that wasn't mine, I paid the mechanical. And then there's services like, Rhapsody and such, where it's obviously a retail destination and people are going there to, pay a subscription and have access to music. But then I think that's where you get out into internet radio and it's still kind of the same thing, only people, the consumer is maybe consuming it differently, or in their mind they're interacting with it like they would radio, but it's still kind of like a stream. Is there a difference with that?
Yeah, there is, and the distinction is based on whether the stream is interactive or non-interactive. So in the situation where the consumer can go to a site and choose a particular song, click on that song, and listen to the full stream of that song, that, under the law, is considered a reproduction that would trigger a mechanical royalty. But in the instance of something like Pandora, where you can't go and pick the specific song that you want to listen to, rather it's considered a non-interactive service where the service is picking the music that you're going to listen to. The law does not consider that to be a reproduction that triggers the mechanical royalty. So in that instance, artists who distribute music or have their music played on Pandora don't have to pay the mechanical royalty.
Would that go for like a podcast as well, like a music podcast that's putting together, half hour's worth of music, not having to pay?
Right. The podcast rules are can be slightly more complicated, but in general, we feel that podcasts it's non-interactive,
okay,
and therefore there's no reproduction triggering mechanical. However, the performance royalties are always triggered anytime there's a play.
Okay. Well, that's helpful. I didn't know the interactive versus non-interactive. Is that something that is like specifically stated in law at this point, or is that something that's still kind of being ironed out as we get further into the digital age?
No, it's stated in the regulations that the mechanical royalties are payable only for interactive streaming. Where the exciting analysis comes in is when you start getting these hybrid type services like Pandora, or where you're not picking exactly what song you want to listen to, but based on some algorithms, the user really can hone in on what type of songs they do want to hear. I think we'll start blurring the lines between what's interactive and what's non-interactive. But at this point, I think it's pretty clear.
Okay. Another question that we get a lot is from international artists, how they go about licensing a cover in the U.S., or vice versa, how a U.S. artist goes about licensing a cover song from a label that's based in the U.K. Can rights flow accommodate that license for the artist?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's rights flow from an artist perspective. Rights flow launched a service called Limelight, which is simply it's a web portal where any artist who would like to cover a song and release it in the United States could just tells us, this is the song I would like to release. This is the format I would like to release it in, whether it's CD, ringtone, or digital download. Tell us the number of CDs or digital downloads you anticipate making and selling. And Rights Flow will go get the license. And whether the publisher is international or domestic, we contact them, put the license in place, and then we pay them the publisher royalties on behalf of the artist.
Is there a turnaround time that the artist needs to allow for before they release their album to make sure the license is secured? Or is it something like, artists are last-minute people. They like to wait till the last minute and go, oh, I should get a license for that cover song I'm releasing next week. Is it something where they could just go online and secure it within an hour or two, or how does it work?
Yeah, under the copyright law, and it's specifically laid out in Section 115 of the Copyright Act for anybody who's interested in wading through the regulations themselves. A request for a mechanical license under the regulations is supposed to go to the songwriter or owner of the composition within 30 days of manufacture and prior to distribution. So in order to make sure that we can acquire a license within the correct amount of time, we request that people come to Limelight 45 days prior to distributing their songs. And in that case, it usually provides us with enough time to guarantee a license. Now, the United States really is a market where a lot of people, they release songs prior to licensing and then realize, oh, I should have gone and done this.
Mm-hmm.
If that's an instance, an artist finds themselves in that situation, they can still come to Limelight, and 99% of the time we can still help. We can still put the license in place, and the publisher is likely to accept the royalties, and there's not going to be an issue.
Mm-hmm.
But in order to ensure that you're protected and that you're paying the songwriters, according to the law, which is what we recommend everybody does, 45 days is what we need.
Okay. And I don't know if you answered this specifically. Could someone like an artist in the UK use RightsFlow to secure licenses, or are you only servicing people that are based in the U.S.?
Now, what for us, the territory where the license or song is going to be released is what's important, and that's what Limelight gets licenses for the territory of the U.S. It doesn't matter where you're from. If you want to put songs on iTunes in the U.S., we'll go get the license for you.
Okay. Well, that brings up a good question. You've said it. You get it for the U.S. So independent artists and just artists in general are, we're releasing the music to iTunes, but it's really iTunes global. It goes to all their stores. Do they need to secure a separate license for like Europe, for Asia, for South America, or is it handled differently outside of the U.S.?
iTunes handles it differently outside of the U.S. In most territories, there's a centralized agency or a society that's responsible for collecting and administering mechanical royalties. So, for example, iTunes UK, because there's one society that's called PRS for Music that is responsible for collecting all these monies, it's very easy for iTunes to just pay the mechanical royalties directly to PRS for Music, and the artists don't have any responsibility for doing that. The United States is different because here we don't have one collecting society. Therefore, it is difficult to go find all of the publishers. So iTunes opted to make that the labels and the artist's responsibility. Mm-hmm. So in short, it's harder in the U.S. than anywhere else, and for most other than the United States and Mexico that I'm aware of, iTunes will pay the mechanicals internationally on behalf of the artist.
Okay, so the artist just basically, if they're handling it in the U.S., through a company like RightsFlow and the Limelight service, then they should be good. They should have their bases covered.
I think so.
Okay.
Yes.
What are the options as far as like purchasing digital download licenses? Because with a CD, you know exactly how many you're going to manufacture. With the download, you don't know. You might sell 3, you might sell 3,000. And so what are the options for an artist as they're preparing for their release to pay for the mechanicals for their digital downloads?
Sure. I mean, it's kind of a conundrum. The way that Limelight works is we ask artists to guess how what they think they're going to sell as an initial proposition, and then prepay the mechanical royalties. So if you would say, I think I'll sell 100 downloads, then you would pay a $15 license fee to cover our cost for actually getting the license. And then we would collect 100 times 9.1 cents, and we would pay that money directly to the publisher and tell the publisher this is prepayment for what the artist believes is going to be downloaded. And then if the artist sells more than 100 downloads based on their iTunes statements, they would come back to RightsFlow and pay another $15 and relicense and go through the same process. Now that allows you to, it makes it so that you don't have to prepay a large amount of publishing royalties. Mm-hmm. But you, of course, can say, I'm going to sell 1,000, and never reached 1,000, and you risk that you've slightly overpaid your publishing royalties. But then you don't have to keep track, and you don't have to come back and license, the process again. It seems to be working out very well. I mean, we've noticed that different artists and different record labels adopt different strategies. Some of them license the smallest amount possible, so that they're not prepaying publishing royalties that they ultimately would not use, and others buy much more bulk and assume that they're going to sell it. And we tell everybody, if you sell more and you need to come back, that's good news.
Yeah. Do those, if you buy in bulk and buy more than you need, at least in the short term, do those expire at all?
Not through the Limelight service, no.
Okay, because I know other services out there, I don't know if they still do, but it would expire after like a year or so. So I think it's probably important to point out that to our artists that when they pay for the CD to license the cover song on a CD, that it doesn't automatically include the digital distribution, that they're two completely separate licenses.
That's right. Different license for each configuration.
Okay. And right now, are those the two main configurations? You mentioned ringtones. Is that covered under the digital distribution, or is that something totally different altogether?
Yeah, the ringtone is a separate configuration, and the ringtone royalty is actually 24 cents per copy rather than 9.1 cents. And that's just set by law. That was the negotiated rate between the record labels and the publishers.
Okay. So basically, our artists should know that with Limelight through RightsFlow, that they can basically go there and take care of any of these needs. Is there some ways that they can get help if they're stuck? Do you guys have an FAQ section or a customer service line that people can call and talk to someone if they're a little confused about their song?
Yeah, absolutely. We have we spend a lot of time speaking to artists and walking them through the process, and are certainly happy to do that. I believe all of the information is on the Limelight site, and it's probably also on the CD Baby site. I don't have it directly in front of me, but it's Alex Holtz. His name is Alex, and he's our artist and client services representative for Limelight, and he's very, very well informed about all these things, and I believe he speaks with your customers frequently.
Oh, okay. Oh, I had one last question for you, and regarding a medley. Artists, we see this happen a lot, where they do a medley of two of their favorite songs or whatever. How is that different, and can they license a medley through RightsFlow?
Limelight, we don't do medleys because it's complicated. There are two positions. The publishers will, of course, say that each composition within a medley is due 9.1 cents. Record labels take the position that the entire recording is 9.1 cents, and that should be divided up between all of the different compositions within the medley. Mm-hmm. And so what we try to do in those situations for some of our larger clients is work something out between the record label and the publisher that works for everybody, and that's just not something that we're able to do through Limelight.
For an independent artist, because we see it actually happen quite a bit, is there anything they can do? I mean, any direction you can give them? Because, I know that they are low priority on the publisher's list of artists or licenses to execute.
Yeah, of course. A lot of it, publishers are overworked. Stacks and stacks of licenses that they're trying to fight through. They should contact us if they've got a medley, and we'd be certainly happy to walk through the options and you usually can help out. Okay,
because I know it's a case by case basis with a medley, and generally the times that we see it happen it's with an artist that it really is worthwhile for them to they're usually an artist that knows what they're doing and has a good thing going, and they just want to get it done legally, and it's kind of a tough place for the independent artist because you can just get bogged down in so much red tape that it never happens.
Right. Right. That's our whole goal, whether it's the artists or whether it's a massive music service that needs millions and millions of licenses. We're just trying to get music out there and help. Let's grow the digital music pie together. And let's have more and more music be used online.
Well, cool. Do you have any final thoughts on, from where you sit, where the music business might be going? I know you guys are really involved with mechanical royalties, which seems to be at a bit of a crossroads these days. I just was curious if you had any personal thoughts or speculation about where things might be headed.
Yeah, it's very exciting times. I think the it's good that the mechanical royalties have been ironed out. I think as far as rates, it will be encouraging when songwriters start receiving greater mechanical royalties from streaming services, and I think that is just going to require more and more people to sign up for streaming services and for people to get used to the idea of streaming services. And mechanical royalties will grow. What the one trend that I think is very exciting in the most recent reports is that songwriters are getting compensated more and more, or a larger portion of their revenue is attributable to performance royalties. From interactive streams, non-interactive streams, more online radio, and it's going to get to the point where performance royalties are more and more important. And I encourage everybody to make sure you're registered with the rights societies, make sure your songs are registered with Sound Exchange, and keep an eye on how you can grow your performance royalties.
Well, that's good advice to end on, and I appreciate you coming on the show, Scott. And our artists, those that are selling through CD Baby already, there is a link to RightsFlow and Limelight right in their account where they can link on through to license a cover song. So that's an easy place for them to find it. But I appreciate you being on the show, and please keep us up to date with any changes or new additions to the service so we can pass along to our artists.
Will do. We enjoy working with you and your artists tremendously, and I thank you for the time.
All right. Thanks, Scott. Thanks again to Scott for coming on the podcast. It's amazing how many indie artists we've seen here at CD Baby that have had some sort of breakout success because of a cover song they did. It's a great way for people to discover you as an artist and then be introduced to your original music. It's definitely something to consider, and the Limelight service by RightsFlow has got to be the simplest way I've seen to make sure you're releasing the cover song legally. So be sure to check out their service, and if you are a CD Baby artist, there's a link to RightsFlow and Limelight right there in your member account, right there from the dashboard. So if you need to take care of that, be sure to check out that link. Well, if you have any thoughts or comments about this episode or previous episodes, we'd love for you to weigh in, and there are several ways in which you can do so. First, you can call our listener line at 206-426-5683. Leave a message there, and we'll try to get it on the show. Just keep in mind that it's best if your comments are under 2 minutes, as that helps us out and makes it a little easier to get it on the podcast. You can also email us at info@cdbabypodcast.com, or you can leave a comment in the show notes for each episode at the podcast website, which is cdbabypodcast.com. And the comment section has seen a lot of action for the last couple episodes. Always some interesting feedback and back and forth going on there. So you might want to look into those as well. Well, that's going to do it. We will catch you next time. Bye. You've been listening to the CD Baby DIY Musician Podcast, broadcasting from Portland, Oregon, USA.